So, Surya, what is your Instagram handle?
Yeah, so I don't have Instagram. I never made an account as well. Never was really into Instagram at all.
Interesting. That's quite unique for people from our generation to have never had an Instagram account. I mean, I surely have a bunch of friends who have, had it for a couple of months or a few years and are now not active or vice versa. And I myself have been off the gram for 2 years at a stretch, which was the largest hiatus I took. But an account was something that almost everyone has. There may be a handful of people that I know of who never got around to making one. So, how did you escape the social pressure and the peer pressure behind getting on the gram?
Yeah, so I did not escape. I was in the ninth grade, so I was like, whatever your friends say is what I consider the truth. So when you talk about only followers or your usernames or accounts, that's what I listen to as well. So it's like I pressure my parents as well. I was like, please let me get Instagram. I'm a good boy. I was a good boy. So
You
I,
still are.
yeah. So that permission is necessary. So I was like, can I please get Instagram? But then they were really firm on their stance that I cannot get Instagram. And looking back, I think I do agree with them. I'm actually really glad that they were firm on their stance. I can easily see them giving in, like, you can do whatever you want, but I'm glad I never got Instagram.
Wow. I think that's quite remarkable, and in hindsight, just worked out for the better, right? Can't imagine how many hundreds of hours you unlocked by not doom scrolling,
Yeah,
especially in periods like COVID, where screen time or Insta time specifically shot up to
yeah.
6 to 8 hours of people just consuming content left, right, and center, consuming ads for hours on end. So, what did you do with all this extra time you had at hand?
Yeah, so at the start, I was just Netflixing it all day. As soon as the 3 hours of school was over, I was just, okay, switch on Netflix. But I think after maybe a week or two, there's only so much Netflix you can watch. I just got sick of it. I genuinely got sick of the TV. So then I was like, why don't I try productively using whatever extra time I had? And basically, that was the entire day. So I started exploring how to self-learn, and up until then, as a ninth grader, the only learning you know is what your teacher teaches you. So self-learning in the sense, I started looking at courses on YouTube and other platforms. I started with YouTube. I think my first ever course was by a company called DataStax on Apache Cassandra. I don't know what it is, but that was just my way of pushing myself into the pool of self-learning. That was my first course on Apache Cassandra.
Wow. And you mentioned your school was only 3 hours. I guess some context we need to add around that was this was during
Yeah, this was during
COVID,
COVID.
not your run of the mill pre-COVID times where you actually end up spending north of 8 hours, including all of the inefficiencies of commuting to and from school and arbitrary time blocks like lunch and so on and so forth. So 3 hours is pretty much a 70% cut down
Yeah,
on the amount of time it takes to do your schooling. And it set a lot of context for us around how much time we actually end up wasting and how little time it actually takes us to learn the
yeah,
contents of what the school syllabus is. And that just forces you to think that if you're above the median of the class in terms of pace, you're holding yourself back just by the law of medians that impacts half the class, which is startling to me. So
yeah,
I am a propagator of homeschooling and autodidactism. I feel students are much better off in the long term when they spend their time with private tutors,
yeah,
because schools in Bangalore, at least the top brass, are supremely expensive.
yeah.
And if you unbundle the entire experience and try to do it yourself, will definitely cost you lesser. It also opens up one member of the family's calendar if you want to plan out things and trips.
Yeah.
And on one of my posts on LinkedIn, I'd written that you learn more by walking 100 miles than reading 100 miles of scroll. And that just fits so well, right?
Yeah.
Students who are being homeschooled can very easily tune in and tune out of remote learning as per their requirement. And it opens up so many more opportunities that require you to move from one place to another without really missing out on arbitrary school coursework. I'm very clearly team homeschooling.
Yeah.
That is the future. If you observe the trends of these multi-millionaires and centimillionaires across the globe, they're kind of disconnecting their family members who are kids from going to school. And even the public schooling system in the United States is a bit chaotic, not only from the perspective of the syllabus, but also the tragedies that happen. You told me that the first course from YouTube you did was on something called as Apache Cassandra. What was that like, and what did you learn, even if you don't know what it is? I'm sure there were arbitrary things that you picked up.
Yeah.
So, what was that?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing, as I said, was learning how to self learn.
Okay.
And it was just like a tutorial, what I did. It was just the lecturer or the host just talking about Apache Cassandra and how you can build stuff with it. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from that lecture was specifically that I could connect with the host on something called as LinkedIn. I knew that my father used it. I didn't really know what LinkedIn was. So when the host was like, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, I was like, oh, this is the perfect way because I don't know any other way to contact him. So that started like 3 day war sort of thing with my family, convincing them to allow me to get LinkedIn. Because my dad was like, why do you need LinkedIn? You're in the ninth grade. Like, it's very unconventional. But I think he gave in when he saw my persistence. So I got LinkedIn and I messaged him first. I was like, hey, I'm SM from the data stacks class on YouTube. How are you, sir? And he's like, yeah, I remember you. So if you actually find the right video on YouTube, you will actually see him saying in the video, I will accept your request because before even creating a LinkedIn account, I texted him on the live chat saying, if I create an account, will you accept my request?
Oh,
I was very
innocent is the
yeah.
right word.
So that's what I did. LinkedIn was the biggest takeaway from that
Oh, wow,
session.
that's quite the story, right? Battles of the Madala family against social networks. And rightfully, I definitely completely understand and sympathize with why that was the case. And if one is unable to figure out how do you regulate your usage of social networks properly, it's better to stay off,
Yeah.
because the lesser productive networks tend to have more negative consequences than the benefits.
Yeah.
And then once you start figuring out how do you train the algorithm to your use case to make it useful for you, I think is the right time to then start using the platform. And there is nobody who will come along as a teacher of Instagram
Yeah.
to you, unless you're in some content creation course. But as a user, I think it's very important to learn to use the platform rightly, what's okay and what isn't. And then there is a whole stack of social governance that come into the picture. What is appropriate to do on the platform? And these
Yeah.
things evolve on the go. And if you're not looped in, you have to learn it the hard way by making the mistake, which
Yeah.
is not really pleasant, especially when you're the new kid on the block who has come from a different city and is in a fairly toxic school. Let's talk more about what was your experience using a platform like LinkedIn. I understand that's your first social network that you got on.
The first thing right off the bat, creating the account I experienced was like FOMO. And it was FOMO with people older than me, people more experienced than me, people who actually went to college, where I was just a ninth grader. So I think I started comparing myself to people who had already been on the platform for a long time,
Mhm.
which wasn't correct at all, right? It's not the right way of comparing yourself.
it is a little differently, and okay to compare as long as there aren't any negative consequences of the comparison,
Sure, yeah.
right? So as long as you're doing it for productive purposes to see what's out there, I think comparison can be a very useful tool in one's toolkit.
Yeah, I think I started off as calling that comparison not healthy. But then that I realized that inherently that comparison within myself is what pushed me to build a good profile. I knew right off the bat, even before I created an account, this would help me build up my profile. So that's what happened. For example, if someone did a program that I found cool, and so I would just do the same program. I would just complete the entire program, put it on my LinkedIn, saying, okay, I completed Devices Startup School, for example. So that was my way of sort of control C, control Ving other people, parts of other people's profiles, and in that journey, building my own profile. So if you say fast forward 6 months, you can see everything I did was an inspiration from someone else's profile. So I guess that sort of comparison was pretty healthy.
Yeah, and life is a sum of parts if you really think about it philosophically and deeply, right? You're just being open and forward about how you looked at what other people were doing. And if you probably take a step back and look at the big picture, you'll realize that the Control C, Control V was really actually discovery and then exploration
Yeah.
and then participation. You have the courage to say upfront to people you speak to that you blatantly copied, which is true, but I guess it's something that more often than not, a lot of us do without really realizing it. And I guess it's not really a bad thing. The entire premise of referral programs that
Yeah.
run are that, hey, why don't you get other people to do it
Yeah.
too? This was a very, very important, useful outlook that you had to look up what people were doing and then figuring it out and then trying to do it yourself, even if the motivation was just so that you could put it on your LinkedIn profile and make up something that boded well.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that your set of people you are comparing, you're new and empty profile, people who had been ahead of you, because that is what enabled you to do things that your fellows weren't doing, right? And that put you on a path of accelerated learning. And from the mindsets that you have that I've gathered from our conversations, I think it was inevitable. I'm just glad that a social network like LinkedIn was able to aid your journey. You mentioned Startup School as one of the programs that you did by Vicom. And yeah, that's something that I've done too. I remember making a profile on their Find a Co-founder page,
Yeah.
and that's fun stuff. I've definitely been through some of the modules, but because I've consumed a lot of content around starting up and venture capital and other things, I felt a lot of it was pretty basic and a little repetitive from what I had previously learned. I swayed away. But yeah, I guess this is a memory that you unlocked for me, bringing it up again. And yeah, for the people who are students interested in getting into the startup ecosystem by just purely learning about what startups are, how does the entire place work. I think startup school is a good place to get started,
Yeah.
and a lot of the learnings are irrespective of wherever you're based from. Maybe a couple of examples may vary based on location to location, but the principles remain intact. So yeah, regardless of Viacom being a predominantly Silicon Valley based organization, I think they add value to entrepreneurs and startups throughout the globe. Now, tell me similar program and courses that you did, specifically that you discovered from LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think my self-learning journey started with YouTube and that course, but I think it moved more so into self-paced as well, not just a YouTube lecture. So I think one of the biggest things I discovered was a platform called DataCamp, and 1 week out of every year they have a free week sort of thing, where their entire platform is free of charge for you to explore. So everything they have, every offering is free. And I think I was exposed to that first. And my criteria for maximizing that 1 week was if I complete more than 7, 8 courses. So basically one course every day. So I ended up doing 10 in 1 week.
Woohoo!
Yeah. And I think that free week slingshotted my journey of self learning. And Data Camp was just sort of a theory or technology thing. I didn't really have a chance to apply it anywhere. And so on my journey to search for places to apply, for example, if I learned Python, which I did, like that was my first and only language I know how to code in. So I was like, where do I apply this? So that started my journey in another program. You're familiar with it. It's called the Knowledge Society. Uh,
Am I familiar with it, Surya?
I'm not sure.
So the Knowledge Society is actually where I met Surya and how we know each other. This is a community of people from across the globe, and we just so happened to be in the same city.
Yeah.
And this program isn't very popular in India and
Yeah.
is predominantly based out of North America with a decent penetration in Europe. But yeah, I guess there's just a handful of us that are Indians from India who have enrolled in this program. So
Yeah.
quite serendipitous, I'd say. But yeah, you were saying that you found out about this one program that I may not really know about.
Yeah. Saw one of the founders posts on LinkedIn is like, my this 15-year-old student of TKS did this. And I'm like, bro, I'm 13. I'm not far off from 15. Maybe I was 14. So I was like, how are, young kids, teenagers, seemingly, it feels like all we should focus on is school.
Yeah.
But they have this entire program and website full of people who've done exactly opposite of that, right? People who have dropped out of university, for example, or people who are doing this alongside high school.
Yeah, and have prioritized their learnings and their
Yeah.
extracurriculars like the Knowledge Society more because I guess it's not very difficult to do the bare minimum it takes to get through school. And if the students have the conviction and the parents have the foresight to allow them to step out and explore what's there, I guess the entire learning journey becomes a whole different ballgame altogether. So yeah, I definitely understand what you're trying to say here. That you read a post about this seemingly similarly aged person who has achieved something that's remarkable, and there's understandably a part of you that says that, hey, how and how did he do it, and how can I be him
Yeah.
or them, however it was, right? So yeah, so you saw this post, and then what next?
Yeah, so I saw the post, took a look through their website, and I was like, this is cool. And the first thing, again, what I felt was, do I actually belong here? Because I had nothing on my profile. And these were people who interned at SpaceX or Tesla or started their own companies with venture backed funding. That I felt really out of place.
Yeah.
And I think looking back, they became that partly because of the training they've received in TKS. So it was really, it didn't really make sense for me to compare my pre TKS journey to their post TKS journey.
But you know that in hindsight.
Exactly.
You didn't know that then. You've just unknowingly revealed to everybody the secret sauce that went into all of those headlines that we read about this 17-year-old scored an internship at Tesla. Right? So these are all predominantly alumni of the Knowledge Society. For everyone who was wondering how are these young people doing great things, getting into all of these impactful companies even before they're getting into college, TKS is the answer to some of the questions at least.
Yeah, it's a very underrated program, I would say. Not a lot of people know about TKS outside of US and Canada, but it's really fantastic. And you don't have to be in the US or Canada, you can take the virtual program, and I took it from Bangalore. So
We did.
yeah, exactly. We both